Texturing polygonal surfaces is a little bit different than NURB surfaces. Polygonal surfaces have their own set of tools for precisely applying a texture map, such as a bitmap or a procedural map. So let's go ahead and start off with a simple cube. And shade that. And let's go ahead and just apply a simple texture. Let's apply a Lambert. And now for this, we want to import something like a bitmap so that we can have something to apply to this. So I'm just going to go and create a render node. And this time we're going to actually do a file. Just use that donut image that we've been playing with here. So in order to see this in the window, I need to do what's called hardware texturing. And you can see that what's happened is it's kind of mapped this donut image however it decided was the best way to map this image, it mapped it. Well, if we want more precise control, we can do that by creating what's called UVs. So we go into our polygonal menu set, and we go under Create UVs. In fact, I'm going to tear this off. And we've got a number of different options here. And each one of those can map the entire surface, or it can map groups of faces. So remember how we applied materials to groups of faces? We can do the same thing with this. We can just select an individual face and map that individual face. Right now, I'm just going to go ahead and map the whole cube so we can kind of see how this works. So when I do planar mapping, what it does is it creates this object that maps a plane. So all I have to do is grab the edges of this object and move it, and I can manipulate it. In fact, if I go into the attribute editor, you'll see there's actually a node that's created called polyplanar projection. And I can actually manipulate the values here. So let's say, well, I actually want it from the top down. Well, then I can just take that away and maybe rotate it along the x-axis, for example, and that will go ahead and make this go from the top down. And really, you can manipulate this however you want. You can even rotate it. There's all sorts of parameters here that you can play with. Now, if we don't want planar mapping, we've got a number of other ones. We've got cylindrical mapping, which creates, as you can see here, creates a bit of a cylinder. And we can scale the cylinder. We can move it up and down. We can do what's called spherical mapping, which again, very simply, it creates a sphere. And so it projects that texture from a sphere around the object. Now for a cube, that might not work as well. There's another one called automatic mapping. And what this does is it projects from each plane. So for example, every side gets its own image plane, and then I can give it as many planes as I want right here. I can give it a scale. I can do all sorts of things. And so this actually is probably the best for mapping generically. There's also one called Best Plane Texture Tool. And again, for all of these, you need to be in object mode. So make sure you go into object mode. Another one is called Create UVs based on camera, and that it will actually project it from the direction that you're looking at. Now, all of this is great, but let's go ahead and use this in a more precise context. Let's go ahead and use it in more of a real-life example. So I'm going to go ahead and open a scene called Dog 11, and that's our famous little dog here. So let's go ahead and start off with his head, and let's apply a texture map to his head. Now, I've created a map that maps precisely from the side. So what I've done is I've actually taken a side view of him and actually created a texture map that works well from this view. And that'll actually make it much easier to map because he is symmetrical. So let's go ahead and first of all, just place the map on, see what that does. So I'm going to go ahead and create a Lambert material, click on Render Node, go into File, and there should be a file out there called Dog Head. Now this looks kind of weird, but bear with me, this will actually work really well. Well, it looks super weird now because it's really not mapped all that well to his head. But we can do a Create UVs to actually make this work. So we're going to go ahead and do planar mapping. Wow, that's almost perfect. So I want to make sure that I'm projecting along with a rotation here of 90 degrees. And my projection width and projection height seem pretty good. Actually, I probably can raise his brow a little bit, but this is actually looking pretty good just the first time out. Okay, so you notice there's a little spot on the back of his head, so I can just, again, expand that, and off you go. So that's one way. Let's go ahead, right-click, and go back into object mode. So now I've got that map on his head. If I want, I can also create a texture map for his eye. Now, typically, how I create a simple pupil is I use what's called a ramp for the render node. So let's go ahead and apply a Phong E, which gives him kind of a glassy-eyed look. And then under color, let's go ahead and put in a ramp. Well, that doesn't look right. Well, this doesn't look right either. I'm going to look at this texture sample here. I want to make sure that I set it to type circular ramp. Okay, so again, I'm looking here, not here. We'll map this a little bit later here. And what I want to do is make sure that my internal color is black, and then each one of these colors is white, because it's just going to be a black and white eye. And I'm really tight on space here, so bear with me. Okay, and then I just want to move this here. So now I've got, you can see basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a circle here. Now I have to map this here. Well, again, we can do that by using a planar map. So I'm going to do create UVs, planar mapping. Now this one's going the wrong way, so I need to rotate this. So I'm going to go ahead and zero this out, see what that does. And that actually works pretty good, except it needs to rotate a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to do negative, say about 20 or so. And maybe even a little bit more, maybe 22 or 23. Again, what I'm trying to do is line this up so that this is rotated so that that spot is centered. So maybe even 24 degrees. And that actually looks pretty good. So if I want, I can actually take that polyplanar projection, and again, I can scale it. If I want this to be a little bit more circular, I can do it that way as well. So now go back into object mode, and you can see I have my eye. Now for this eye, well, I've already got it mapped, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this and just do Control D and move the other one over, so that way I don't have to repeat that process. And there we go. Here, let's go ahead and fix his ears. Let's go ahead and finish this guy up. So I'm going to go ahead and select his ears and just right-click, assign existing material, and that's going to be the black for his ears. And one more, we need to go ahead and select the head, and let's go ahead and get that nose. Go ahead and select face, and then just lasso select all the faces on the head. Right-click, and again, he's going to have a black nose. So there we go. So there. So now our dog is completely textured. And as you can see, we've used several different methods of assigning materials by polygon and also mapping him.